Good morning, everyone, and thank you for being here with us today. I'm so excited to have this opportunity to present with my friend and colleague, Ginger Kwan. And today we're going to talk about the power of community-based organizations and higher education partnerships. So before we get started, we're going to introduce ourselves. My name is Ilene Schwartz, and I'm a professor in special education at the University of Washington. And I'm also the director of the Herring Center for Inclusive Research and Education at the University of Washington. I've been at the University of Washington a long time, and I conduct research on inclusive educational interventions and sustainable interventions in public schools, and especially in the area of early childhood and especially with children with autism. And at this point, I'm going to turn it over to my colleague Ginger Kwan and let her introduce herself and tell you a little bit about her organization. Okay, Ginger.
Thank you, Ilene. Good morning, everyone. My name is Ginger Kwan. I am the Executive Director of Open Doors for Multicultural Families. But most importantly, I am also a parent of a young adult who has autism. I am part of the funder to form Open Doors for Multicultural Families in 2009. So I'm glad that this opportunity for me to share with you where we come from and how we started. Yeah, Open Doors for Multicultural Families was founded in 2009, actually from my home at our kitchen table. And it was a great honor to work with a group of passionate parents and also professionals who care about people who have developmental disabilities, come from linguistically and culturally diverse backgrounds. So when we came together, we have formed our mission, vision, and value. And for the past 10 years, we have progressed. And currently, we have revisited our mission, vision, and values. And you can see that, in our mission, we have 3 pillars. Is really that we want to engage and partner with our target population, and through a cultural brokering system, which allows us to navigate a system and also provide a specialized programming for people with disabilities, and least but not least is really to change for the system that can, put equity in their lenses to design their services, so people with disabilities who historically are underserved will be able to access the services, and that's based on their needs. And we have our values that we go by, and our vision is that we envision all people with developmental or intellectual disabilities, come from linguistically and culturally diverse backgrounds, will thrive in the societies of their design. And this will be fulfilled through our mission actions in equity in action. So we have been growing tremendously over the years. You can see the picture on the left here. That was actually our first office, very tiny. In 2013, we started, and up till today, in 2019, we actually has passed some significant language access bill that really address the culture and the language needs of our community. Besides that, we have provided a lot of program overall. We have grown many different programs throughout the years. Currently, we have served more than 2,000 individuals and their individuals, that including people with disabilities and their families, throughout many different programs. So over all these programs that we created is really based on the lifespan approach, because developmental or intellectual disability is a lifelong issue. And we know that when a child, when they are young, been identified as having a disability or at risk of being developmentally delayed, their family needs a lot of different services. But throughout the years, as they grow, then you started to interact with many different service systems. So at Open Doors for Multicultural Families, currently we have early learning programs that is focusing on the connecting families to early intervention services. We do developmental screening in 5 different languages. We also provide a childcare, the play groups for parents want to learn how to engage their young children who have disabilities in the group setting. And then we also have a family support program and services that is very individualized. Very often we hire people who come from the community, speak the similar language, speak the language of the families we serve, to serve them. And these family support services are individualized in a way that families drive the program services. When they come to us, they tell us what they need. And based on their needs, we customize our services to link them to the services or apply those services for them by like filling out the applications, because very often the language barrier was a huge for many of the families to access services. For example, DDA services or BENS fund or dealing with SSI, DDA, and also even particular school system as well. So we do a lot of individualized services support to navigate a different system education. For example, social services, sometimes legal, health, all of those things as well. And then on top of that, we also have a homelessness prevention programs to support those families whose children, who raise child with disabilities and also face risk or being challenged to maintain in a stable home. And these are the programs are very helpful to many of these families. And besides supporting parents or caregivers, we also support individuals who have disabilities. Our youth programs, the first one from age 5 to 13 is called Friendship Circle. We focus on social emotional development for our young children, who have disabilities, and empower them and also help them to gain the social emotion, to gain social skills, form friendship with others, and be able to engage in the activity they are participating. And then we also have other youth programs, for example, pre-employment training programs. That's for age 14 to 21. We prepare our youth to go to work after school, or we also prepare them through the other program, the self-advocacy training program, to go to college as well. So there are different programs and services designed just for the multicultural youth who have disabilities and to transition to adulthood successfully. And then we also have assistive technology programs that addressing the needs for each individual person who have disabilities, increase their communication skills, increase their daily function abilities through different technologies. And last but not least is our advocacy and civic engagement program that we provide family leadership training programs, particularly for linguistically and culturally diverse families. And the program aiming for increasing the communication skills for parents with other providers or with policymakers to address their sons of daughters' needs, and that will result in program service design changes that can meet their desire and also meet their needs, and also our system will better be able to serve these underserved population, and their voices will be heard. So if you look at here, the number-wise, currently our staffing is close to 50, and we have about 25 to 27 different languages spoken by our staff together. Also, the people who we have served, you can see that in terms of the ethnicity are very diverse as well. We have family support staff who speak directly in Vietnamese, Mandarin, Cantonese, Somali, Amharic, Tigrinya, Korean, Arabic, Spanish, English, so there are so many different language we are able to support the family. If they speak other language than our staff, we also will use interpreters to serve them. And you can see that the growth we have continuously between 2015 to 2019. We have continued to serve more than 2,000 individuals each year now. Ilene, pass this to you.
Okay, thank you so much, Ginger. It's always so amazing to hear you describe Open Doors and to hear the passion of that you bring to that project and the amazing work that you do for our community. So now I get to tell you a little bit about the Herring Center. So the Herring Center for Inclusive Education is located at the University of Washington. And we're committed to working with community members to help build inclusive communities and support children of all abilities and all backgrounds. We have some commitments that guide our work. We're advocates for inclusion. We are researchers. We train the next generation of professionals. We create community partnerships, and we support access to high quality education for all. At the University of Washington, at the Herring Center, we have 3 interdependent activities that go on at the Herring Center. We have a training and professional development arm called the Professional Development Unit. We have research that goes on that's primarily funded by the federal government and by some local foundations. And then we have the Experimental Education Unit that provides education to children with and without disabilities. The wonderful thing about these 3 arms of the Herring Center, these 3 teams at the Herring Center, is that they work together to really take a interdisciplinary approach to identifying and solving problems that are facing children, families, and professionals. I'll tell you a little bit about our accomplishments. The Herring Center started in the 1960s with funding from the Kennedy Johnson administration as part of the War on Poverty. We are a university center for excellence in developmental disabilities. And as I said earlier, we have 3 primary teams. The Experimental Education Unit, which is kind of the service and educational arm of our program, professional development, and research. So let me give you just a few of the highlights of things that have accomplishments that have taken place at the Herring Center. In the 1970s, our staff were some of the first in the world that worked on educating children with Down syndrome. And because of the work at the Herring Center, we demonstrated that children with Down syndrome can learn and should be educated alongside their typically developing peers. In the 1980s, people at the Herring Center were very interested and dedicated to developing and demonstrating the effectiveness of inclusive education, and also the Sibling Support Project that many of you may be familiar with here in the Seattle area was developed and started at the Experimental Education Unit by Don Meyer. In 1990s, Project Data, which is a school-based early intensive behavioral intervention program for children with autism, was started, and that still runs. And that's a school-based program for children with autism that is dedicated on 2 primary principles. One is that children with autism are children first and should be educated alongside their typically developing peers and receive the intensive, extensive, education that they need. And the second is that student failure is instructional failure, which basically means that if a child's not learning what we think we're teaching them, then we need to teach them a different way. In the 2000s, we really worked on developing and disseminating what we call the building blocks framework, which is a framework to be used to provide instruction for students of all abilities and backgrounds in inclusive schools, inclusive preschools. And now in the 2010s, we're very interested in thinking about equity-based inclusive education. So how can we take what we've learned so far and make sure that children of all backgrounds, and especially those who have been historically marginalized from public education, receive access to those services?
Yeah, so our partnership, for Ilene and I, we went back 20 something years ago, and you can see my son at that time was so tiny, the little kid with, and at that time he was less than 5 years old when we first met. And I was a parent who is actively in the early intervention arena, representing parent voices, and through our interaction at the conferences or a presentation or at like a training opportunities, Ilene and I kind of pass by each other and talk with each other. And she is somebody who I admired a lot, because at that time, EEU, the experimental education unit, has the intervention programs. Up till today, they still have a specialized for children with autism. And that was, I wanted to have my son over there, but I couldn't because we live outside of Seattle school district. But I know their inclusive services and education has produced a great outcome for many young children with autism. And so from then on, Ilene and I, we just continued to kind of run into each other at this place or at the other places, but we never had very formalized working opportunities until recently that we actually come across one grant opportunities from University of Washington, and that grant is called Unite Ed. And the Unite Ed, the grant has this principle on focus on relationships, learning, and the community-defined priorities to transform inequitable systems and foster just and equitable partnerships through shared governance and decision-making, and build from and with community to support justice-centered educational change-making, and support joint learning to enact equitable education partnership, and collaboratively sustain this community-centered educational justice work. And so these are the principles and also values we practice at Open Doors for Multicultural Families. And it's so aligned with what we are trying to do. And also that's something that when Ilene and Kelly approach us, Beth Kelly approach us, we share the similar belief and also similar values. And so we are very excited about this opportunity. Finally, I get to learn from Dr. Ilene Schwartz, who I admire for many, many years. And we also are looking forward to see more research that can be done in our community, because we don't see many researches are done in a very culturally and linguistically responsive way, and also are following these principles to conduct the research. Too often we were approached by researchers who just come to us, oh, can you participate in this survey? Can you help us to reach out to the diverse community? And that's it. And so we are like an afterthought, or we were not partnered at the beginning as an equal partner to make decisions at a table. And so for that, we were frustrated quite often. But when we got this opportunity to work together with Ilene, we got so excited. We say, oh, this is something that we really can do. And this grant also provided time and opportunities for us just to know each other And so that's very important. And come together, we collaboratively, we believe that this project has embarked a transformational journey for a linguistically and the culturally diverse community-based family support organization and the researchers of the higher education at the University of Washington to create a true partnership that leads to collaboration. And we are excited for these mutual learning opportunities that can increase both organizations or institutions' knowledge and understanding of how we can better plan and set a foundation for our future collaboration to benefit and also make a positive impact to the community we serve together. Yeah.
So I think Ginger is way too kind in how she describes this. She is right in that we have known each other for well over 20 years because there was a core group of people who were at every state meeting about autism, and we would always see each other but never really had the opportunity to work together. And as a typical university researcher, I would call her when I was writing grants, and she would always very kindly write us letters of support. And one day I remember I called her and said, can you help us recruit people for a focus group? And she kind of read me the riot act, and which was a good thing, because she said, I just want you to understand what that request means, that is time that my staff has to put in that we don't have payment for. We don't have support for that kind of activity. And I had never really thought about that. And it was interesting because the next week, this RFP came out for this grant. So we wrote the grant together, and even throughout that process, she was so helpful in pointing things out. Like the entire grant, it was a very university-like grant process, all online, with lots of forms, lots of jargon. And she said, I'm not sure that most community-based organizations could complete this form. You just want to understand that, we're a big community-based organization, but could most community-based organizations do this? And it made me really rethink all of the expectations, things that we take for granted when we're asking people to participate with us. Just the paperwork alone for Open Doors to get paid by the University of Washington is an horrendous process. And to think about that for most organizations, it really is, we make the bar high. But one of the things that made this partnership work was the willingness to learn from each other. We have to, whenever you go into a partnership, you really have to be open and go in with a growth mindset to understand that all partners have strengths, and all partners have areas in which they can learn. And I think that so in this partnership, we were really able to learn from each other about how to think about research and services for people from the BIPOC community who were experiencing disability. So I think the power in our partnership was that we were really committed to attempting to engage in activities that led to actionable change and equitable outcomes. That was, from the beginning of our partnership, something we all agreed on. And we knew that we wanted to work with families and to help them work with schools to improve services. We know that there are a group of families that are historically marginalized by the public education system. Many of those are BIPOC families, and for families that have a BIPOC status and have a child with disability, those families are maybe doubly marginalized because there are many systems that they don't seem to fall neatly into any system, and sometimes are not served by either system. So we know that most of you have probably seen this figure or something like this figure, but I think that it's always important to remember that when we start thinking about the the status quo, when we start thinking about the services that exist, to think about outcomes rather than the services. And when we have services that we think are equal, but in fact don't result in good outcomes for everyone, we realize that those services are not effective. So we really need to think not about serving everyone the same, but in making sure that we're providing the services for every student and family that allows them to achieve the meaningful outcomes that are that they want, that we all want for all of our children. I think it's important for us to also acknowledge that now we are also governed by the Andrew Supreme Court hearing. That means that all children with a disability need to have an IEP that is appropriately ambitious. And I think that for those of us that look at IEPs, most of us would probably not use those terms appropriately ambitious to describe the IEPs that we look at, but that now is the law. So we have an amazing team that worked with us on the on this racial equity theory of change process. So Ginger and I and Stacy Sage from Open Doors and Beth Kelly from UW.
So when we come together and we decided, get to know each other and find out what we intended to do, through this grant, what kind of outcome we want to have. And so I think most people are very familiar with the logic model. And it's a kind of a roadmap or snapshot or one picture that help a group of people to decide what direction they want to go and what the outcome or goals they try to achieve. And it's a roadmap. And however, too often, the roadmap, how we build it, did not take into consideration of the racial equity and did not see through the equity lenses. And these are actually so important to people of color and the Black Indigenous communities as well, particularly because our life experiences are impacted by a lot of systemic racism. And so there are a lot of institution has been set or the door has been shut first. And those are the area that we need to address if we truly want to partner with people or community that have lived experiences of being discriminated without opportunities, has always been put into the most disadvantaged position from the beginning. And so there never been a playing field for us to talk about. And so when Ilene and I, we talk about the theory of change, I shared with her that we have learned from Dr. Sharon Knight, who is a consultant, has been working with Open Doors for multicultural families for the past years. And she has introduced the racial equity theory of change to us to help the whole organization to address our programming, who are our stakeholders, who are the gatekeepers, who are our partners that we need to work together and to dismantle the racism from the systemic level. And so we decided this will be a good learning opportunities for both of us to learn about how do we really identify those elements or those barriers and the crucial people who can help us, and also those gatekeepers, how do we approach them to remove the barriers that's needed as a result that people who we serve will have the best outcome. And that's what we embark to form our partnership based on building this racial equity theory of change together. And so So for some of you who are not familiar with the racial equity theory of change that we used, is basically from the, we draw this from the Aspen Institute. They have this roundtable on community change project on racial equity and community building. So we learn from their work. And what I meant, quote, is the retalk is a step-by-step guide designed to help community groups define the necessary interim and early outcomes required to reduce racial disparities in neighborhoods and the regions in the long term. It is prerequisite for understanding the scope and the nature of the activities that will be necessary to bring about racial equity in a particular context. The basic premise of the retalk is that chronic racial gaps in important opportunity areas such as education, employment, housing, and healthcare are strongly associated with structural racism, close quote. And so really is that we know the retalk strongly focus on two different areas, what they so-called like a hardware, which is related to like public policies and also institutional practices that have reproduced outcomes disparities in fairly obvious way that we can see it. And then there is a software they talk about is including some of the cultural representations and also some of the building system dynamics already there that prevent the progress or even create a retrenchment in our community. And so by learning, going through this process, understand in order for us to make changes, there are so many structural barriers we need to remove. And we found it very helpful by creating this process together. Yeah, Eileen.
So there are 5 steps to the retalk process. And what we did is Ginger and Stacy and Beth and I would meet together every month for about a year, and we worked through this process. And the first step was defining what we wanted, and then and doing this all within with the idea of how do we want to change the behavior of our organization? How do we want to build our partnership with the outcome of ensuring that we were whatever outcomes we achieved were based on racial equity and working towards dismantling racism. We worked then to set our priorities. We talked a lot about what the supports we needed or what impeded our progress, and how we could change those. Then we talked about what we already knew, what was there, what strengths we brought to the table so that we could work on this together. And then finally, the last step of the process is to map out what you must do. And so as Ginger said earlier, we all have probably spent time developing theories of change. And this is a theory of change that has racial equity is embedded in the idea of and process of racial equity. So again, this is just an idea, another picture of that of the racial equity theory of change. And I'm going to move on from this so that we can spend more time talking about what we actually came up with. So we came up with 3 building with our long-term outcome, saying that through Open Doors and the Herring Center partnership, culturally, linguistically diverse families of children with disabilities will access culturally and linguistically appropriate information and services and will feel their voices are heard in the education system. Open Doors and the Herring Center partnership will be equitable and sustainable. So that was our goal. And then we came up with 3 dimensions that we wanted to work on. The first was to establish an equitable and sustainable partnership that includes mutually beneficial expectations, communication, and resource sharing. The second dimension was to increase and access diagnostic and intervention services that are culturally and linguistically responsive and promotes equitable outcomes. And our third dimension was to increase bidirectional engagement between families and educational systems. And I think that you can see that all of these are outcomes that are really are embedded in the idea of racial equity. So the first building block was to define to think about an equitable and sustainable partnership. And one of the things that we did in this slide, in this outcome, was work together to implement the one grant we had and to write a number of different grants that we unfortunately did not receive, but also in communicating with each other about resources that we found in the community, and make sure that if we heard of an opportunity for open doors, or if open doors heard for an opportunity for us, we would be able to share those.
And the most recent activities that we collaborate together is the Inclusionary Practice Project, which is housed at it is funded by OSPI, and Dr. Cassie Martin is part of is a lead for this demonstration site. Project lead. And from Open Doors, we brought in our staff, Joy Sebe, who is our assistant director, and also our consultant, Dr. Sharon Knight, together to bring in trainings and technical assistance, coaching for educators at those demonstration sites. So we are building this roadmap for engaging linguistically, culturally diverse families who have children in school with disabilities. And also we have done a webinar on how do you work effectively with interpreters to serve family. And there is also one more webinar is coming up talking about how do you engage and also work with CLD, the cultural linguistic diverse families, and their youth for the better youth transition outcome. So those are some work that we do together currently. And for us working together, even though it's so short, less than 18 months so far, we actually have accomplished some of the basic like short-term outcomes. For example, we actually are much more comfortable with each other. We know each other's culture, and we have developed the mutual understanding what it takes, and also what are the process that can enable both Open Doors for multicultural families and the Herring Center to better work together. And we also have, through our connections, we actually are able to access to UW, and also successfully recruit 3 intern students since last year. And these 3 interns are incredible, has contributed so much to Open Doors. And then they are also, we feel like our relationship has become much more strengthened, and we can, openly talking to each other for many different things. So these are some tangible short outcomes we have seen. Yeah. And for the long-term wise, and we definitely have a great goal and great hope. With very high hope and high goals there. We hope that today, through our presentation, actually can attract people's attention and want to learn more about this type of work we are doing, and give us funding so we can do more, and then publish the work we are doing. That's hoping that we can do. And also through the professional development that we provide, that is centered in the BIPOC and also intersectionality of the population we serve, we can generate more funding opportunities that is going to focus on in this population, so we can learn more about what would be considered best practices or research the practices that can be shared by many people in different regions. And of course, mostly is that the special education teachers through our TA and also professional development, they learn and have the tools how to work with the CLD, the linguistically culturally diverse family, the BIPOC communities with their families, so the students, they can have a best education outcome. So what we have learned through this partnership is that, first of all, really, it takes the cultural humility and from both parties, and also put ourselves in a very vulnerable situation or position, and not be afraid to share, and which is really hard sometimes because we all are afraid people might judge us. And I would say I bring my own baggage as a parent to begin with, and I started Open Doors for Multicultural Families because of my son to begin with. And then I learned how to serve others. But I didn't go to school to receive education, how to run a community. But when I was working with Ilene, she let me know that she is learning from me. And from that encouraged me to share more and also give me more kind of empower me in some way to also learn to say no, which can be sometimes pretty hard to say it because people don't know what it takes to do the work we are doing. For example, when people say, hey, can you help us to disseminate this this research questionnaire to a family? And what that turned out to us will be, first of all, we need to understand, are your questions you're asking for families relevant or not? And we have to identify who are the population will be suitable for you, for your research. And then we have to translate the material, the questions into different languages. And then our staff has to be available to explain it to them within their cultural context. And then there will be follow-up questions. Is it going to be individually survey them? And that will be making a phone call rather than sending out the piece of paper or through the email, because quite often those who you want to reach out to, I believe, will be those whose voices are not heard. Then they will rely on the one-on-one direct contact. So on and on. Those are all nuances that we are able to share with Ilene, through our learning process together, and which is really difficult for us to tell everybody who come to us. If we receive like a 2 to 3 requests a month, can you imagine how can we do the work like that without sufficient or equitable resources? Yeah.
So someone I may have been Ginger told me a proverb that is, if you want to walk far, if you want to walk fast, walk alone. If you want to walk far, walk together. And I think one of the things that this collaboration has taught us is that we are going further together. But the work that we do on the front end is helping us ask more authentic questions and get better answers to those questions. And in because of we're running out of time, I just want to talk a minute about what our next steps are. Is that we want to make sure that we can sustain our partnership. We have done, I think, a pretty good job over COVID, although we haven't been able to go to Kent and have Ginger feed us, which is one of the best parts of the meeting. We want to continue to look for joint activities to really think about how to use the retalk process. And I want to think about how to use the retalk process in every time that I have to do a logic model, that we should be thinking about a racial equity theory of change, not just a theory of change. We're so excited that we've had UW students working with Open Doors. It's been transformational for Open Doors and for those students. And now we need to be thinking about how we can get this work out to policymakers so that they can understand the importance of building and supporting these true partnerships and evaluate what we're doing and making sure that we're we can continue to make important changes. And so at that, I'm going to just tell you about an opportunity for those of you that want to get involved with a project that Dr. Jill Locke is and I are running about we're recruiting teachers, K-5 teachers in Washington State who have a student with autism included in a school. And if you want to participate, there's the link for it. You can just email asdprep@uw.edu. And now I'm going to open it up for questions. So I'm going to stop sharing and go back to our, so we can see everybody and see if there are any questions.
Yeah, I remember there's first question asked about how do family come to us, if I'm correct about that. Yeah. So basically, the honest answer is that they just know. I don't know why. Like we receive regularly like more than 40 new referrals every month, and I do know that those referrals come from schools, come from children's hospital like autism center or CHDD, or from community clinic. Also, many are referred by families we have served, words by mouth, and they just come to us. And we do the best we can, continue to get resources enough to support these demands, because think about 40 plus new referrals every month. Each individual who comes to us will take our staff at least 20 hours of time to go through the intake process, to identify their needs, set up the implementation plan or support plan to start to support the families to address the issues they have brought to us.
And I think that again, Open Doors has become so well known in the community that basically anytime, for example, we get a request at the Herring Center, or I know many other professionals on campus get a request about services for families, for diverse families, we always refer them to Open Doors. And so because of the quality of the services and because of the flexibility of the organization, Ginger told me when COVID first hit that how many food boxes did you put together in the first month? So you were able to pivot to meet the needs of your community. Mm-hmm.
Yeah, last year during COVID time, we have received close to $1 million of funding to serve more than 2,000 families. And with the food, with rental assistance, with cash, or food vouchers and medical expenses, all kinds of things, including diapers for the little kids.
Thank you so much, Ilene and Ginger, for this wonderful presentation. Hi, everyone. I'm Maria Hugh. We had since you all did such a great job engaging the audience with your own questions in the chat, we had some other questions in the chat that I wanted to present to you all. So
Maria, I also saw there's a question about are folks with disabilities employed at Open Doors, and the answer is yes. Our staff are very diverse. People with disabilities are employed at Open Doors, including one particular staff I just want to mention to you. She was the first group of youth we taught probably 8 years ago. And after she graduated from our program, she went on to volunteer with us, continue to work with us. And then she went to college and got her 2 years degree. And then she came back, we hired her. And now she's working on her 4 years degree. And besides her, we also have other people with disabilities on our staffing and on board as well. Our staff are very diverse. Parents as well, or family member who have a child with disability or nephew or something like that, and also professionals who just care about this population. And together we speak about 27 different languages.
Thank you, Ginger. You caught that before I could even see it. That kind of leads to one of our first questions. So we had a couple of different questions about how to ensure that we're making accessible language services for families in their home languages, and ways that organizations can make sure that they're hiring people who speak a variety of languages to be accessible for all the families and individuals they serve. Do you all have thoughts or recommendations around that area?
I just want to say something quickly, and then I'm going to turn it to Ginger, who's the expert in this area. But I think early on, Ginger, early in the presentation, she talked about issues of cultural humility and cultural mediation. So it's not just language that it's important, and that's necessary but not sufficient to have the materials and the correct language, and have someone present at the meeting who can speak the language, but also understanding the culture is more than just speaking the language. So, Ginger, do you have other comments about and thoughts about that?
Yeah, and Eileen, I think you're right on. And a very good example, my personal experience is that one of my best friends when my son was so young and needs support, right? And I also have a younger daughter at that time. She was like 18 months old, a baby. And I need to take my 3-year-old son to go to early intervention services. And I don't have anybody to watch her. And also my 4.5-year-old daughter at the same time. And I rely on, the natural support in the neighborhood, right? And here comes a an Ukrainian immigrant who did not know a word of English. And I communicated with her with smile and with gestures. And she watches my 2 girls when I took my son to early intervention programs. And we remain great contact till today. We still have a good relationship. And when her first son got married, we are the only Chinese sitting at the honor guest table there. We look around, nobody look like us. We have no idea what they are talking about. So I truly believe that building relationship with people is not just only language. I believe that. And at the same time, I want to answer the question that how do we ensure that there's language support? First of all, you need to put that as a priority. Do you even have a budget? Look at your budget. If you don't have a budget for the language interpretation or language translation, no way. You don't do anything. You can only talk, and you always want people to do it for free. But that is really your own practice. You have to change your practice. And first of all, put your words, put your resource, invest into your values, and your values shows. And once you change your behavior by having the budget there, likely you can change your practice. And Maria, I forgot a second question, unfortunately. What was the second question?
I think that's all really helpful. I think our questions were about how we can make sure that services are accessible in different languages. And I really appreciate how you all provided the content also, that it's not just about language, but cultural match and matching values and being sure to listen to families.
Yeah. And believe it or not, even though we speak 27 different languages, of course, that still have so many different languages we cannot cover. So we make it very easy for everybody to access to us. We have a language line that our staff who don't speak the language, they will use the language line to serve the family. So you think about, we are already a very diverse organization, linguistically wise, but still that is our standard practices. And the other way is, if your organization don't have a language access plan, it'll be a good idea to bring it up to the decision makers and talk about, if you intended to serve the population that speak different languages, then you got to have a language access plan, because that's not only about the system, your resources, but your whole organization have to change how you train your staff to access the services. And like your front desk person, they don't just pick up the phone, oh, I'm sorry, I don't understand you, sorry, without knowing how to access the support system you set up. Yeah.
Yeah, thank you for that reminder. I think it's so clear how families can lose access at so many different steps in the process. Natalie Flores, one of our MHTTC Smart Center staff and excellent partners, has our next question.
Yeah, and first I want to say thank you so much, Ilene and Ginger, for making this happen, and all of you participants for attending as well. A question that came up is we often think of theories of change for research studies or agendas, and I would like to mention this mission and vision statements and goals for other organizations. How can we work to align these things?
That is a very good question. And I love this question because, in fact, at Open Doors for Multicultural Families, whatever we do is based on our values. Really, we practice that literally every day. Every time when we have staff meeting, we ask each other, what have you done in the past week that your behavior is aligned with the values? And based on that, when we make a decision, we will ask ourselves how our decision-making process has impacted the people who we are serving, and in what way on the organizational level, individual level, and also on the community level. And it all has to be embedded. It all has to be woven together. And so for that, if you look at your organizational value, mission, and vision, are they aligned with what you are trying to do? Are they looking, do you make a decision looking through the equity lenses? Are your practices driven by equity, driven by the needs of the people you are serving? And that's from our experience, that has been very helpful to align our workforce together, so everybody understand why we are doing what we are doing and why we make this decision. Yeah. And Ilene, I'm sorry, go ahead.
No, Ginger, just, such an great example of why I love working with you, because I just wrote that down about asking people in our staff meeting, what have you done that aligns with our vision and mission? And I think that one of the issues is that as researchers, so often we write theories of change for research studies, and then we don't look at them again. Or we might say, okay, I'm on 4 different projects and I have 4 different theories of change, which is, but what's our overall theory of change? So as a center or as a university or as a collaborative, what is our theory of change? And I think that we don't spend the time to think about that. So I think it's making it a priority to value and go back to those. Do you want me to put the screen up with the evaluation question?
Yeah, if you don't mind, that would be a huge help. I hate to cut this short. I think that seems like a natural pause, though, for all of us to really reflect on our own theories of change in our work and our visions. And I just want to thank Ilene and Ginger again for the thought-provoking and important conversation today. We do have an evaluation that Ilene just put up, but also has been put in the chat. This helps us report to our funders about what the needs are of community members. And so it's really important for us to get that information, and also your clock hours, should you want those, will be available after completion of that as well. So thank you so much for joining us. We're going to leave the webinar open for a few more minutes to collect any links and resources from the chat box. And we really appreciate your time and everyone's thought and conversation.